Okay, we are live today. Live, live. Hello, everyone. We are actually off site today. We are traveling and we still are going to be committed to doing our lives every week. So, hopefully, you've got some questions. If you're just now joining our YouTube, and you are part of our school community, go ahead and put some chats in the line so that I know you are here from our school community because your questions trump the ones that we have that come in. And if you're not here live, I'll be answering some of those questions now. So if you are new here, this is your first time ever watching me, go ahead and tell me that too. I like knowing we got new people here who are wanting to hear transitional housing options and opportunities, and I am here to be able to share them with you. So if you are brand spanking new, go ahead and let me know that here. Also, if you are wanting to connect with us in our school community, you can do that at tonyschool.com. That's TONISKOOL.com. There is where we have other purpose driven leaders who want to create successful transitional housing programs in their community. So definitely reach out to us there. That's where we all get together and network and create partnerships and collaboration. So I look forward to you joining us there. So we're going to jump right in because we only get 30 minutes on these calls. And if you are wanting to hear our What Would You Do from our school community, it will be done at the end. So definitely stay on for that. So the first question that I got from our community was related to funding. I get a lot of questions on funding all the time. And one person wanted to know, how do they keep the program from depending on one funding source? Now, those of you who know, we've been doing this for a minute. I don't teach one funding source. I actually teach you how to layer your funding so that you have multiple sources coming in that can help you not run into a situation where you don't have enough coming in to cover the cost of the program that you're running. So I am promoting that you have more than one. So that's going to be the first thing I tell you to do. That's one way to make sure that your program can keep going forward because you don't have one funding source. So I would just encourage you to make sure you don't have one and you'll create multiple streams. I always like to say three or more. And the way in which we talk about this, which if you've not done our 5-day challenge, we go in great detail talking about funding and how you create the layers. But you have three layers. And in those three layers, you want to make sure you have a solid foundation first so that you are building on a solid foundation, something that's consistently coming in all day, every day. And you can create that. It's very simple. And then you would then add on top of that with something that is still substantial, but it's going to stay. And then I sort of like to think about that third layer or more is like icing on the cake or like the sprinkles on the cake. We've talked about that before as well. So making sure that you have multiple streams coming in is critical. And if you are a nonprofit and you rely on grants, and let me just tell you, I always tell you, you don't need to be a nonprofit and relying on grants. You can still do this in a for-profit, just work in partnership. But I would just encourage you to have multiple applications that you could apply for if you are applying for a nonprofit grant. Once again, those are extremely competitive, but that would be sort of like your icing or your sprinkles on the cake if you were to get funding. And I would just encourage you to rotate that. Don't just have one solid, just continually build on that. But once again, to get to that level, not only do you have to have some outcomes, you have to have results, you have to have some seasoning in what you're building. I want to just tell you that does come with time. And even in time, it's a very competitive playing ground. So I just say if you're going to do it, make sure you have multiple layers and you rotate them in. Make sure you maybe even keep a grant calendar if you want to do that. But I think what's critical about funding here, you realize there are people that will give to your program and not want anything on the back end for a tax write-off or whatever. They just want to support what you do. You can still get that funding and not be a nonprofit. So I'm just letting you know you can create a donor list and people who want to just donate to what it is that you're doing. I also know on some jobs, they also provide opportunities. They'll do matching funds. I know at my last former job that I had, they had a wonderful program that was set up where if you were given a certain amount to a nonprofit, they would match that for you. So look and see what options you've got available if you are a nonprofit and you are wanting to figure out how you can get donors and do it in a creative way, because that yet too is another creative way that you can move forward to get funding. So, like I said, funding, most people get afraid when they get into the space because they're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to pay for everything? Is if you structured this right, you already are set up right from the beginning. So I would just encourage you to make sure that you're doing that. Now, the next question I got, which was really exciting, was talking about the rules. It was talking about specifically the resident rules. How do you actually design them so that they actually work? And I could tell you, as long as we've been doing this, our rules still stand pretty solid. We have some consistent guidelines that are set in stone that we use with our residents, and we don't just have them. We communicate them on a regular basis. Why is that? Because we want to make sure that they understand what those guidelines are, especially the ones that are like your deal breakers, the things that everyone must do. So you want to make sure that you are clear and that you're fair, and that you enforce whatever it is that you say you're going to do. And we communicate that regularly so that people are comfortable and they understand what the expectations are day one. If you have a loosey goosey program that doesn't have solid guidelines that they must follow, and I don't like using the word rules, to be honest with you. I like saying guidelines, or like your guideposts, because there are some differences. And when you hear that word rule, it just makes people uncomfortable. But be creative in how you define that. But whatever you call it, whether you call it a rule, a guideline, a requirement, please make sure you're clear. Make sure that there's no misunderstanding about what you're saying, and you've communicated that multiple ways. You didn't just give it to them in writing, because what if you have somebody who has limited understanding of what it is that's written? You want to make sure that's communicated regularly. So as you do that and make sure that you're giving them that information, you're doing it in multiple different ways so they understand what the rules are. And you're not vague in them. You're very clear and specific about what your expectations are. So when you do that, they will work, and you're consistently communicating them, they will work, and you're setting it from day one. You don't wait until they're there and then later on reinforce. No, you want to make sure up front you have given them specific guidelines that they will follow, and when they follow them, this is our expectation, and when you don't, this is a consequence. Once you're clear and understand, and there's no room for confusion, then you are in control of what it is that you're creating. Now, I have actually seen where some providers, operators, actually allow for the residents to participate in designing what some of those guidelines look like. Let me just say, make sure you know what yours are first. Don't go into a place where you allow them to control the program, because guess what? They don't control your program, you do. So as long as you know the consistent guidelines you want to set and set expectations around, there are other opportunities where you can engage them, because the goal is to create something that not only protects their safety and their dignity, but you want to create harmony. And by allowing them to participate in the creation of some of the guidelines created, then you can really have some success. One example I know that we've used a lot is related to cleanliness. Like, we are pretty particular about what our expectations are on how things need to stay cleaned. And we don't utilize, some people utilize a house manager to do those things. I don't. Because at the end of the day, if you're also wanting to teach individuals life skills and teach them how to maintain things on their own, then you want them to learn how to do those life skills. So we allow for them to have some flexibility in identifying what those guidelines look like in their home. And when they're not followed, that's when we step in. So we let them know, hey, this is our expectation. How would you like to manage that? And let them take some control over that. But then when it's not meeting what your expectations are, don't wait long. Quickly come in and level set that so that you can build it beautifully. I love it where you can allow for them to have some ownership and buy in what you're building, and they respect the home because they were a part of building it. So those are some dynamics that should help you as you think about designing specific guidelines that work. And that truly will work when you do it the right way. I'll just say that make sure you get into a habit of checking regularly what you've created. Because as I said, we've been doing this for 15 years. I can go back to when we first started and see how things were created. And we still use a lot of those guidelines today to make sure that things run smoothly because they do, they work. And we review them regularly just to make sure everything tweaks like it should tweak. And once you do that, you are guaranteeing that you've got a system that will work, even if you've got to make some changes, slight changes, but over time, it should work consistently, getting you the results that you want. And I will also add, I know I'm talking a lot about this one, but this one is a big one. And I could talk about this one in a whole training series by itself. You want to make sure that as you are communicating the expectations, have something in writing in common places too. We love doing that just to make sure, while you're sitting there making your breakfast, you see right in front of you, these are the guidelines we operate by. And you can make it look beautiful so it doesn't look like such um, a program, right? You can do it in a way where it's still beautiful, reinforcing the guidelines that you expect, and you keep that moving forward. So that was a really great question. And thank you for asking it. I might still consider doing a training specific on that, just that will elaborate on the detailed steps. You can definitely get it in our VIP, and you can also get it in our platform, the details of how all that works. Okay, another question. Let me make sure I have no questions here yet. Nope, not yet. So the next question is related to churches and partnerships. They want to know, how do they approach churches for partnerships? So I can say, if you are a faith-based program, most of you are, because you are purpose-driven leaders. Most of you involve faith in what you're designing. And even if you aren't, or you haven't considered it, you might want to consider it, because you have to understand there are a lot of churches out here that would love to work with providers such as you and getting results. And they want to do it more than just simply, you know, giving to it. I mean, it's amazing when you can get a partnership that will allow for them to give to what it is that you're building, like to give to the guys in the program. But they do a lot, from giving you support with like volunteers coming in and working with you, giving things for the property. Like, there's so much that they can do. I just want you to just consider your program itself and identify specific things that you would need them to do. And then with that, make sure too that whatever it is that you're creating, because remember, we're building something that is going to live on in legacy, and you're basing it off of a mission. So when you can show how you are impacting the community, they want to be a part of that. So help them be a part of what you're creating. And you can do that very easily by telling the stories of what you're creating, and let them see your heart. When they see your heart and they see where they can help, definitely they will do that. And I would start with my church first. Like, start with the church where you go. And if you don't have a church home, then go to one that you can identify churches that have very strong um, homeless outreach programs. They're like the best ones. I know that as we go visit churches, we can see some that they have very strong outreach programs. Those are perfect, but you can't even leave out the ones that don't have strong outreach programs. Imagine you're looking for a church home and you get to a church that doesn't have an outreach program, and guess what? You can create that there. Like, let God lead you through that experience. Let him guide you to where you need to be, because I can easily see you creating a program that easily could fit into a church that didn't even have outreach, and now they do because of something you created. that could be your mission. Like there's so many things that you can build off of that. And I hope I dropped something on somebody who would want to expand on that, because as you go to churches, there's a need for services that reach out to people. And if you've got something either working in the prison ministry or in outreach or working in recovery, you can be able to bring that to a church as well and create a beautiful program that would support your mission as well as the community. But that's how, and I would approach them, you know, not with a big ask. Like, we're not there to put a lot of burden. Maybe you're getting ready to have an open house. Like, when you do your open house, you could invite them to see if they want to come or if they want to participate, or even maybe host a clothing drive. Like, if you're working with guys coming out of incarceration and they need a suit that they want to be able to interview well, you can do that. I mean, a lot of church people got a lot of clothes, then a lot of things that they can be able to give. That would be a great end. But just be thoughtful as you think about ways in which they can help you so that you can get the help you're looking for. I don't want you to just have empty help. I want you to create something that makes sense in your program. And then as you build and grow that, you're definitely going to have the relationship that you want to create. And then I'll just add this part too, going back to how I mentioned you providing an outreach to the church, because this is about not just you, it's about them too. So when you talk about a partnership involves like whatever they need and you need, you meet together. So if they have a need for something and you're meeting that need, go ahead and create that. And I can tell you, once you do that, you can move mountains in what you're wanting to create. So definitely look for the partnerships with the church. Okay, how do I keep my building in good repair? So first of all, make sure you buy right. I'm just gonna say, I've been doing this for so long, and we've had them all. We've had them all, from properties that we would get through the tax sale that needed a lot of work, and then you had some that were easy breezy, a tweak here and a tweak there, and we were able to create what we needed. The goal is just to make sure that whenever you do get a property, that you can keep maintenance under control. And let me just tell you, that is the one thing that can make or break your program fully. If you have, on several levels, financially, as well as having a property that if someone comes and looks at it, they can say, yes, this is a sound home that we want to be able to have our residents come to, or our clients come to. So making sure you maintain it well is critical. So we actually use a checklist that we like to follow that has places where we check things monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, annually. Like, we have a list of things that we look for and that we want to be able to follow up, responsibly checking on a regular basis. And we have a person, that's their job every month, is to make sure every property is checked on and that we are assessing where we are with those things. If you are in my VIP community or you have my platform, you can find that maintenance checklist in the back. And it is amazing. Like, it still holds true. We've been using it for a long time, and it still works. So having something that allows you to check all of your systems on a regular basis, those are the things that are going to prevent small issues from becoming expensive emergencies. And first thing I think of is when you think of the those AC units. Once those AC units aren't managed well, those are the first most expensive things. Or when your plumbing's not checked, those are big ticket issues if it's not caught soon enough. So you want to make sure that you are checking things and making sure that you are getting the work done in the property that needs to be done. And when you address it immediately, you're putting together a system that will ensure your property will stay maintained well. And we have a system that we use that allows the residents to report work orders so that we are knowing what's going on immediately and the team is addressing it. Those are the type of things you want to have in place, a way in which people can communicate that to you immediately, and then you're responding within 24, 48 hours with what's going on. And when you do that well, you're making sure that problems do not become bigger than they have to be. We also make sure that we build in ongoing repair budget, making sure that there's money set aside to cover those expenses. Because once those expenses, you get a big hit, like that could take everything. So making sure that you're doing that well. Now, those of you who might be renting, it's a different way in which you would manage that. We have beautiful relationships with our like all the properties we've had, we've owned, but when we've had to rent, there's a way in which you can do that well to make sure that you are getting a property that's still well maintained, because there's some responsibilities that don't fall on you, that does fall on the owner of the property. So making sure you clearly define what is and what is not your responsibility if you are renting. And I would just encourage you, go ahead, if you haven't, start getting a good list of reliable contractors to work with. And I say three. I always say three. Why? Because you want someone who's your high, mid, and low. Because I'm telling you, when they're not available and you've got an emergency, you need it dealt with. And you do not want to not have somebody to go to. And we don't always go for the cheapest. There are some things that you want to make sure you're paying top dollar for because of the maintenance issue that is happening, but making sure you've got reliable contractors, that's critical. And making sure you're collecting their documents, because without their documents, you are not. And there's 6 critical documents that every contractor must provide us. And if we don't get those, we don't deal with them. If you want to know more about those 6 critical documents, feel free to reach out to me on our school community. If you're not a part of our school community, at tonyschool.com, TONISKOOL.com, go ahead and join. And then you can ask me what those 6 critical documents are, because I'm only going to answer it in our school community if you'd like to know what those are. But definitely making sure that you are keeping the property in good repair as you are, and maintaining it regularly so that you can stay successful in what you're building. And the last question before we get into our what would you do is going to be on our it's the question was around relapse. How do I handle resident substance relapse? So this is specifically talking about those who are doing recovery. And I'm just going to say this: we've done recovery. It's not my favorite niche to operate in. And I'll just say that if you decide to just do recovery, or if you plan to incorporate it with other, like let's say you want to work with people coming out of incarceration, but it's a drug-free, alcohol-free environment, and you're creating that, then you're going to make sure you still have these things too. Like you need to have these things as well, because people do relapse. And if you have a drug-free, alcohol-free environment, and let's say you brought somebody in who's in your program, and you're working with people who, used to be incarcerated and they just got out, and they used to be an addict, coming before they came in. Now they're in with you, they're in recovery, and now they have a relapse because life happened, right? You still need to have a way in which you are covering yourself. Hopefully, you have gone through the measures to make sure that you've been classified as that type of building, and you're going to make sure that you have some type of written relapse policy in place that talks about that. What happens when a person relapses? Because at the end of the day, when you're doing that, your goal is to make sure, number one, that they are safe. You want to make sure that as they are dealing with that issue, that they are safe and the people who are there in the property are safe. And then how is it that you are going to then get them the help that they need? You need to have um, uh, the resources and support that's necessary to help them move along. And if that's not your expert space, make sure you have people that are that can help you in that piece, so that you have immediate support for them and resources that they can tap into. And especially if you have a recovery home and they're relapsing, understand how that impacts everybody else in the house, right? So when you have impacts like that on the rest of the house because someone has relapsed, all those things you have to think about. And you truly have to make sure that whatever it is that you create, that you're not punishing them for relapsing, because they already probably feel bad that they relapsed, but then making sure that you help support them with what they need, because your goal is to make sure that everyone is safe, and that those who are experiencing the relapse, they feel safe. They don't feel punished by your actions against them. Like I've heard people say they just kick them out. That's not, if you are recovery and this is what you do, you need to have a process that you follow. And how do you manage that process? Just be clear in how you do that. And I would just let you know, you have to decide on a case by case basis on whether or not they can stay. Because it is going to depend on several things, like the severity of the relapse, like how severe was it, and how willing are they to getting help. Is this something that has occurred multiple? Like, you need to be aware of what things you need to consider for them to stay on the premises after they've relapsed, and how it impacts other people. Because once that happens, you can have an entire house that's relapsing all because of one person. So I would just encourage you that if it does happen, document, like document, document, document. I always say if it's not in writing, it does not exist. Make sure you covered yourself as it relates to that, and you involve your team in putting together the plan to help them be successful. That is, to me, the best approach that you can take when working with somebody who has relapsed. Now, here's our what would you do, and I'm excited about the what would you do. We got several people who commented on the what would you do in our community. I'm going to read it here for you. It's what would you do, rent first or buy first? And I love this because this actually came from last week's Q&A, from one of our students. So I said, let me just let's just put something together and just see what other people say, because this is how it reads. You're ready to open your first transitional home. Your vision is clear, your heart is ready, and now the question is, do you rent first or buy first? Option A, rent first. You find a home you can lease and launch your program right away. It lets you move quickly, test your model, and build momentum while keeping flexible. Or you buy first. You purchase a property and build from ownership. Every improvement you make adds value to your long-term vision and positions you to build equity while serving purpose. What would you do? Would you start by renting to get experience, or buy to build ownership from day one? And some of the comments that we got on this, which I thought were pretty, we saw them on both sides. Some people are saying they see the value in both of them. They see um, where buying a property could be more beneficial. Got people saying that they want to rent first. Here is my perspective on that. And let me get my screen back. There we go. So, when you think about renting first or buying first, there's several things I think you need to consider in this. And there are a lot of advantages and disadvantages that you need to be aware of. I think that depending on where you're located is a big driver. Like here in St. Louis, if you lived in St. Louis, there are hundreds of homes you can buy under 100,000. Hundreds of homes. Hear me. Hundreds of homes. And you got the tax sale. As you know, that's how we got into this. We were purchasing property with cash at the tax sale, because you could get the property within a few months after the property is confirmed, and now you got a property. So to get in is really good in Missouri, or in St. Louis specifically. And even if you were to buy under 100, your mortgage is going to be nominal, right? Compared to renting. Renting is high. So I think you need to look at where you are first to determine, should I rent or buy? Let that be at least one of the factors that you consider, because getting in when you can enter and get in a property for under 100,000 or under 150,000, or be creative in getting, because I like creativity when I get properties. Like, I didn't add the piece on here. I'll probably see if I can tag it on the back end, the things to consider instead of renting or buying. We'll talk about that in just a second. But these are the things about renting first. You want to just first look at that option and see the advantages of what it takes to get into that. Clearly, if you were to rent first, you're getting in, you don't have a lot of the responsibility as being the owner. You could test things out. Like, I get it. I get why you would want to do that. You can launch quicker because you don't have to worry about closing costs or closing and all the time it takes to close. All the risk is really on the landlord to be able to carry, but you don't have any control. Those are the things that you're going to have a challenge, because you don't control it. You get no equity. You can potentially have some instability with that, because depending on how that landlord, I think I heard somebody say they were renting, and the landlord changed the terms on them. And like, because they saw how profitable it was for them. And now what do you have to do? You have to find someplace else to be. Like, those are the challenges that you are going to deal with when you're renting. So I would, so that's renting. Let's talk about buying, and then we'll talk about a blend, right? If you were buying, obviously you've got the built-in equity. You're going to have everything you can is yours from day one. But if you're in an area where the rent is, or the mortgages are high, the cost of homes are high, yeah, you're already looking at a mortgage $2,000 to $3,000 a month. If you're in a place where the mortgages are going to be higher, the purchase prices are going to be higher. So even though you do have equity and stability in having a property that you buy first, and you also have the freedom that you need for your program because you get to create it as you need to create it, you still got the challenges because you are going to pay more for that and sometimes you're also going to be slower because sometimes it takes 90 days to close. Like, you have all those, or to find even the right property, like that takes time. You also have the maintenance responsibility. If you heard me say about maintenance before, when you're renting, a lot of that responsibility is going to fall on the landlord, the big ones like, HVAC, things like that, which you can do some other things to make sure you keep those things down, but you still have a challenge in dealing with that. So rent or buy, those are the things you need to consider. What I like, because you already know I like buying, but buying through the tax sale. So I do like that. If you have access to getting cash and you know how to navigate that well, that to me is a great way. And you're in a county where you don't have to wait like a year or 3 years or anything like that. You literally get the property after it's confirmed within a few months. Those are the best type of tax sales to get. Even though you got and do that confirmation, they help deal with, like, you get the right attorney to help you deal with if someone who's living there, you can help transition that as you need to. And I apologize, I got a little cold, so bear with me. Now, that is buying in a tax sale. I also like lease options. Lease options are amazing because you might find somebody who's tired of being a landlord and they want to just let the property go to you, and you have the property and you could purchase with the option to buy. You rent it with the option to buy. I like that because now your money's not going lost. If you want more guidance on that, like that, being creative is my specialty in real estate. Remember, I told you I do real estate. So if you have a property you want me looking at with you to consider some creative options, because you can be creative with that too, that combines renting and owning with it. Or if you wanted to do something around the tax sale, all of that is possible. But bottom line, if you were getting into this, you need to first weigh how much it is in your area and see if the cost is going to be better for you to rent or to buy. And then, of course, I will just say, if you do choose to buy, make sure you got multiple options for that property. Like, if you get here and you design this program, it doesn't go like you really wanted to, what will be your plan B? Because being able to have a property that works for you and you want to turn it into an asset, you do not want that property being a liability for you. So as long as you have revenue coming in that covers the cost for that property, that's how I need you thinking about that question. Whether you rent or buy is based on what you can do with that property when you get it. How do you keep your costs low enough? So if you're buying it, making sure that it's cheaper to pay a mortgage than to rent, or it's better to have some options for yourself instead of renting. So these are some things that you should consider. I could talk about this topic all day long and doing combinations of this, but I loved how you guys are just thinking through it. Everybody's situation is different. So if you want some guidance on whether to rent or to buy, reach out to me. You can DM me in our school community at tonyschool.com, TONISKOOL.com. Once you join, send me a DM and just say, hey, Tony, I had questions about whether I should rent or buy first. And then share with me. I don't mind talking with you about that. And you better get me while you can, because my time is becoming more and more precious to where I cannot give you guys as much time as I want to. So get it while you can. And I am so glad that we had these questions today. I look forward to seeing you next week as we talk about more questions, and be sure to look in our school community for this next What Would You Do? Because this one is going to be a doozy. And I look forward to seeing you guys soon. Thank you.